Welcome, welcome, welcome to our next episode of D1 All Stars. I'm really excited about our next guest. Christopher Peguero is a recent implant to Fitchburg, but actually a native of Wisconsin. And I'm really excited to have him. He's part of the new part of our district, District 1, lives in Seminole Hills. He's going to be talking to us about a variety of topics, including DEI, parenthood, and life. So, without further ado, let me welcome Christopher Peguero.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate being recognized and just being able to come in and talk to D1 residents. I'm super excited that you're our older. So congratulations, first of all.
Thank you so much. And we have a connection that goes back a little bit further than us. I actually knew your sister when she was in law school. I was in grad school. And then years later, a mutual friend who's an alder in Madison actually introduced the two of us. We met in a park under a shelter and had some really great conversation. And then redistricting happened, and I got to be your alder, and I appreciate all the support that you've given thus far. So thank you for joining us. Um, Usually, what I do to start off D1 All Stars is just ask folks to tell us a little bit about them. So, who are you, Christopher?
Sure. I'll make it brief. I can go long. So just keep me on tab. I did grow up here in Wisconsin, in Green Bay, Wisconsin, but originally from Laredo, Texas. My dad is from in his side of the family from Laredo, Texas. My parents met at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. They moved up to Wisconsin, first up to the Menominee tribe. My mother's a tribal member of the Menominee tribe. So both Latinx and Indigenous are my background. So I grew up in Green Bay. We were very poor, and that really, I think, helped shape my perspective of, access to resources and who has access and who doesn't. That didn't really become super apparent to me until after college. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Part of me leaving, though, Stevens Point, was I was also uh, I had to come out of the closet and have that self-actualization. And for me at that time and that time frame and where we were with history, that wasn't something I could do close to home. So I moved out west to Seattle and have lived out there most recently for the last 23 years. Um, Briefly, that history, I used my background with environmental work that I gained from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point in social work, sociology. Um, my work in Seattle was really in the environmental nonprofit sector, and then combining an environmental scope, but also a racial justice and environmental justice scope to that work. Um, I ended up after about 10 years in the nonprofit sector, moving to the city of Seattle as an employer and working at Seattle's public and electric utility, Seattle City Light, under the Environmental Affairs and Real Estate Division. In 2010, aligned with the City of Seattle's Race and Social Justice Initiative, and looking at how the City of Seattle really implemented that initiative across the city, and specifically at Seattle City Light. That was kind of my job. Uh, After a few years of doing that work, really asking the question at our environmental affairs and real estate division, how are we actually implementing that through action and connection to community? And so I challenged, I made this proposal to my executive and said, hey, let's start an environmental justice program at City Light and in our group, and we can use the principles of the city's race and social justice initiative and really make some inroads with the community to help guide us in seeing some benefits to the community as we implement our environmental policies and procedures. So I started that program. That program really then influenced me to take a stab at running for city council in 2019. And again, before the pandemic, I was, what you're doing is great. Having kind of a virtual get to know residents and being on camera. I was camera shy. I could do debates and stuff, but man, I didn't want to be in front of a camera. But now, we're in 2022, deep, in pandemic, coming out of it, hopefully, and we're used to being in this virtual world. So I'm more used to that now. But that would have been a great tool running for a campaign for city council. Seattle District 2, that's where I ran. It is the most racially, ethnically, economic district in the city, and one of the most diverse, racially and ethnically diverse zip codes in the United States. And so I ran on a platform of environmental, economic, housing justice, environmental justice. I didn't win the seat, but I became really good friends with the person who did, who is currently running and doing some great, phenomenal work in Seattle. So kind of quickly back up a little bit. In 2008, I met my husband, Anthony, at a Obama election night party, and we bonded over our love for motorcycles and the idea of having kids someday. And so we've been happily married. Actually, yesterday was our 9th anniversary of us being able to be married legally. Been together for 14 years, just about 14 years. And we have 2 kids, Adela and Alexander. They're 7 and 8. My son will turn 8 on Friday, and my daughter turns 9 at the end of the month. So that's kind of some background. You mentioned my sister. She lives here in Madison. She is an attorney for the city of Madison, and I briefly worked for Madison Parks Division for just about a year as the assistant superintendent for the Parks Division and Community Services and Public Information, and did some work around Ryandahl Park and homelessness issues. So those are my connections here, and now work for Promega, the biotech here, Fitchburg's largest, I think, employer, and helping them start out with their DEI, our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion program, and Communities of Belonging program, and a lot of internal work, but excited to be part of that journey with Promega. So, loving Fitchburg and still getting to know it and trying to make it home for us as we connect to community and are reconnected with our family. So that's awesome. Kind of the story, the journey.
I love it. So 2 things, I'll be brief. One is I didn't meet my wife at an Obama rally, but she actually saw me once before we met at a meeting to go volunteer for Obama. And then I actually ended up taking her canvassing on like our 2nd or 3rd date. So we got something in common.
That's awesome.
Since you're a dad, I will say with a dad joke, because of your work in Seattle, to sum up everything you've said in 3 words, truth to power. Get it? But we actually ran up all of our time, which is awesome because I enjoyed hearing your story. We're going to dive really deep into it in our next section. So again, Christopher Peguero, D1 All-Stars. We will be back after this. D1 All-Stars, we are back. And Christopher, I see you're in one of our favorite gathering places in Fitchburg, Barriques on McKee Road. Love hanging out at that place. So let's talk about Fitchburg. You and your husband and children moved here. Why Fitchburg? And, how do you like it so far?
Sure. I don't know if I fully figured out why Fitchburg yet. I'm really happy where we landed. I think coming from Seattle, and I think both Anthony and I, just our life experience with our families, we've never really had a lot of room. We've always lived in really tiny spaces and no yards or anything like that. So when we had the opportunity, it was really an opportunity to look for a house in the Madison area. We wanted to be close enough to the city, but also have some space for our kids and connection. So, and then also, I've got a family that live here in Wisconsin. We just wanted to be another place that our family could gather and also have some access to the outside. So those are important pieces to us. And as we started to get to know the neighborhood that we live in, I think a lot of the progressive values that we saw coming from Seattle, a lot of our neighbors really held to those same values, and that was really important for us. As, again, as a queer couple with kids, multiracial, a lot of diverse perspectives that we bring. We wanted to make sure that we had that around us as well. So that was really important. So yeah, so I guess that's kind of
Excellent.
the important pieces.
So space to play, space to be who you are, being your truth, and you know, folks that think in a like-minded way. That's awesome. Um, so you've been here for, you know, about a year or so, correct?
Yeah,
So what do you see as opportunities for Fitchburg? Maybe something that we don't have that we could use, or something we could use more of.
yeah. I think I think one thing is definitely again from connecting to my campaign and kind of the core beliefs that I have um, around access to resources and a lot of that kind of initial experiences of my life is really making sure that we're using that collective approach to making sure that everyone's uplifted in our communities and connecting communities that may have quite a bit. I see a lot of wealth in Fitchburg, and still we have a connection to Madison, and we're very close. So I think we can, if the more that we can tie how we build collective wealth, whether it's a community center for youth and job pathways, that we're really looking at that collective benefit uh, um, and how we connect to it as a community. I think the more that we can share that story and have examples of uplifting um, communities that, especially youth that may not have opportunities right now, and helping them along the path to gain access to education and jobs. For me, that's really important. I know that that was really helpful for me as a kid and through my early experiences going through school. And so that's, I think, if I can be part of that, I would love to. And the more that we can, I think, really show that benefit is something I'd like to see.
Absolutely. So, you know, you talked about some of the work you did in Seattle and some of the communities that you connected to here. District 1 here in Fitchburg is probably the most, you know, diverse district in, well, at least in Fitchburg, but if not in all of Dane County. And of course, you know, you growing up in Green Bay, you speaking to having grown up in poverty and, you know, being able to have opportunities yourself. What is it that you know, see yourself getting involved in now that you're here in the Madison area?
Yeah, I think I'm really excited to be part of the story with Mega again, and I think that we're really looking as a corporation on how we are informed to implement the DEI program at Promega. I think there's always going to be connections on sharing the benefits that Promega has as a company and how that translates into community benefits. So whether that's STEM programming for youth of color to consider biotech as a career path, that's one area. For me personally, I really think for me, what I'm hungry for is reconnecting to community, Black and Brown communities, the queer community, and again, looking. We have a lot of challenges. Recent announcements by SCOTUS around abortion rights and reproductive rights. We've got issues on the, Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. We've got other trans bills that are coming throughout the nation in different localities. Really the intersectionality that I bring from both racial and my sexual orientation and my experience with poverty, there's a collective approach to that work, and connecting to community is really it's super important that it's a collective lift to do that work. So I'm hungry for that connection with community. I'm learning again with my job at Promega and how that translates there. I think there's room for all of us to take part in the work, but also how we translate that work to benefit all people. regardless of race or gender or sexual orientation, that we all benefit from that collective, um, those collective benefits. Um, so that's
Absolutely.
what I'm hungry for, and I want to make those connections. And I think it's definitely Fitchburg, but also Dane County and Madison. There's so much richness here on the work that's happening. One thing that I do really miss in Seattle is the real organized Black and Brown communities in Seattle really holding our city government accountable to its implementation of race and social justice and that connection there. But I think that there's a lot of really great resources here. It's just making sure that we all have time to connect and keep that perspective and those priorities front and center.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you have a background that's rooted in a lot of places, right? So, I heard obviously the Menominee Reservation, Menominee Land, Green Bay, um, Texas, Mexico, Seattle, Stevens Point, all of these different, places that you've called home at some point or your people have called home. What has all of that sort of contributed to who you are and how you walk in the world?
Wow, that's a deep question. That's a
Yeah.
great question. You know, there was a point I think, and that was when I made the decision to leave Point and to go to the Northwest. That I had to go through a process of coming out. I had to make come to terms with that aspect of myself. So at that moment, I kind of ran from Stevens Point to go see the world. I did have an opportunity at Point to travel the world, do my last semester of college in the South Pacific, in so Australia, Fiji, New Zealand, and that was my first experience on a global perspective. But that gave me the sense of myself as a larger global citizen, and really having a greater sense of my place in that world versus kind of being boxed in, you know, you're Native American, you're Mexican, you're gay. All those have kind of stereotypes of what that means. And so I wanted to explore and be more than just those things. And yes, be those things, but more. And so I think trying to, I think, really bring those other experiences elsewhere to a local sense, have more of a global mindset, be open to more ideas than I think a hyper local one. So there's benefits in both, and trying to see that connection point between those things.
Absolutely. So much to unpack. I wish we had another hour segment, but I think we can probably squeeze in another episode at some point. We're going to be back, and when we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about kind of your role in at Promega as well as when you were with the city. But I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Again, Joe Maldonado, Christopher Peguero, D1 All Stars. We're back. D1 All Stars, we are back. So let's talk a little bit about what brought you to the area professionally. So when you came, you were with the City of Madison Parks Department. Tell me a little bit about that journey.
Sure. Yeah, I think um, the combination of my prior work from an environmental perspective, but also the City of Madison and the Parks Department are committed to racial equity and social justice. So, and that whole initiative for the City of Madison really stemmed from a lot of the work the City of Seattle had been doing. There's an organization called the Government Alliance for Racial Equity that really informed and helped the City of Seattle start that program. So there's some connection points between both municipalities, and I saw that. Again, my sister working for the City of Seattle as an attorney, doing some law around civil rights work and racial equity. I knew of that and had made some connections, and so I think my prior work in Seattle really spoke to where the City of Madison Parks Division wanted to go. And so I brought in some perspective that they wanted to see implemented. Again, I was there just short of a year, so and moved on to Promega. I saw an opportunity that was closer to home, a little more convenient, and also brought me closer to that work. where as an executive, as an assistant superintendent, I was a couple steps away from actually implementing in the programs. So I had a kind of a reevaluation of where I wanted to be. And so that's why I made the move. Folks at Madison Parks are doing some great stuff. Um, and I'm still connected loosely with them and want to continue helping them along that journey as well. I think, again, this is a collective work,
Yeah,
and we all need to be together to do that work. So,
absolutely, absolutely. So, um, I'll ask you this, as somebody who's in an elected office and I work with city staff all the time, what are the opportunities and challenges of sort of trying to make racial justice, social justice within a governmental structure? How does it work?
sure. I found for me that question initially was really tough for public utility. Public electric utility was still part of the city government, but really the job of working for a city government is public servitude. You're a public servant. And so the point of a race and social justice initiative is really to analyze public policies and systems, not personal systems, and how they fall short of providing resources for everybody. So there's an equality, equity kind of question there, right? But we want those oftentimes public policies do broad strokes and provide the same resources for everybody, but that can often miss the point to be individual to meet people where they're at. So that public policies with broad strokes can continue to broaden or increase disparities. So understanding when those things happen and how to change those systems to make sure that everyone's uplifted is part of that analysis. So really for me, that argument within the public sector is an easy one. I'm a public servant. If I'm not doing my job, you're paying my bills to be a public servant. If I'm not doing my job to meet everyone's needs, and some people are suffering because of public policy, we need to address those issues. And so it's really and public policy is not, from that perspective, not in the business of taking away rights from one person and giving them to another. It's making sure that everyone has the baseline rights and options or opportunities for access to resources. So I think that becomes a pretty easy argument. And I know that we're in a time of divisiveness around that question, and but I think it's a really easy one to answer. And I think we all benefit if everyone has the ability to thrive.
Yeah, I love that argument, and I'm going to use it from now on. So
Let me know. I'm
yeah,
happy to help you write some speeches.
absolutely. It's interesting. There's right now we're in the process in the city of Fitchburg of putting a park in an area of Fitchburg that has about 11% of the population, but has no public parks that are free of charge. We have a golf course there, but and that's the argument that city staff made in proposing it, making sure that it's actually a really sound investment, is that if 11% of people live here, 11% of people should get access to a beautiful green space, and I love the idea of making sure that we're serving everybody, we the people, right? How does that move over into working for a corporation? So how have you found that transition? I know you're pretty new in your role at Promega, but
Yeah.
how does DEI work translate in
You know,
that
I think
aspect?
I think I'm just really glad, number one, that corporations and like Promega are having that conversation on where they fit. I think it is for me a bit of a transition to think about um, how that translates into corporations. Since I worked within public utilities and the public sector, had a bit of an activist background, right? So I think where I see the benefit is as a job generator, income generator for the region, and making sure that benefit of good paying jobs and benefits we can reach more people and diversify our workforce, primarily be a place, a destination employer is the way I look at it. Also, there are so many studies out there that show diversity at the table of decision making or product development benefits that company. It makes people happier. If we're addressing human needs, that those are really good business practices as well, and make people happy in the long run. I think when I was doing some research about Meg, I didn't know a lot about them when I was had first applied. The story that was shared with me from the community was, oh, they're a really good employer. They're a great place to work. Wow, what an opportunity. So for me, it's increasing that ability for more folks to have access to a good employer that cares about their employees, that has great benefits. Promega just won an award for work-life balance. And so wouldn't that be great for more people to access an employer that is committed to work-life balance and committed to not only for you to be at work, but also for you to be at home and be with your family. So those are great things that I think everyone should have access to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for all the insight today. I like I said before, I think we need a second episode, so I'm going to make sure we get a part two on this. But Christopher Peguero, thank you for joining us and sharing your story, as well as the lessons and the movement that actually comes from your experiences. It's a wrap. Thanks all.